The young man at the counter spoke without looking up. "There's no service here." The man didn't respond. He placed the glass on the counter and headed for the door. 5 minutes later, he would be standing in front of that same door, arms outstretched, pushing back the crowd. No one could have guessed who he might be. Welcome to Nishim Stories. Before we begin this powerful story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be remembered, hit that subscribe button. Noon light struck the cafe window in slow motion, catching a thin vein of dust as it slid inside. The grinder's thud sounded like the place's heartbeat, one breath per pull, one brief hush per espresso. At the end of the line stood a plainly dressed middle-aged man, Aiden. His shoulders neither sagged nor flared. They held a steady, centered line. The cashier, eyes half raised, recited the protocol without owning it. "There's no service here." The tone offered more distance than rule. 3 tourists at the front table tittered, the glossy edge of unfamiliarity flashing in their laughter. For a second, a familiar quiet hung in which the question why hit a wall and slid back. Aiden said nothing. He set the paper cup on the counter, the rim touched his finger and made no sound. He turned to the door. The bell chimed once, then the panel rested. The cafe's hum returned to its track. No one noticed the short, high-center steps in his gait or how the ankles worked without tipping the hips. The street was bright, but the shade was a calm shell. Aiden stepped into it and read a small, folded slip. Bread, half. Milk, skim. Batteries, AAA. He refolded it and let his palm warm the paper. A faded fabric bracelet sat on his wrist, a knot tied and untied again and again until it became a ritual more than a sign. His phone buzzed. A reminder slid over the lock screen. Drill note, civilian reminder. One touch, and the sound went still. Today wasn't for tasks. It was for ordinary life. Through the glass, he saw the 3 tourists. Cameras lay on the table. Straps drooped loose. Their laughter leaked through the pane without pressing it. The cashier, earbuds down, disappeared toward the back. For a couple of minutes, the cafe would be half-manned. From the corner came a brake squeal. At first it dissolved into city noise, then turned metallic when a car door opened into it. A cyclist clipped the door and went over, skidding onto the curb. Chairs scraped inside. Curiosity pulled bodies to the threshold. The 3 tourists were first, phones rising like a forest of antennae. Before Aiden turned, he drew his left foot half a step back and seated his weight. He walked, neither rushing nor dragging, in time. As he moved, he read the fringe. Who held breath, who left the hatch open, who swung arms in panicked excess. In his field of view, there were places, not sentences: airway, exit line, shadow. At the crowd's lip, he stopped and showed his palms, an old language meaning, "No threat, let order form." His voice landed between order and plea, heavy and clear, half a step back. The crowd rippled, then receded. A student started to kneel by the cyclist. Eaton reframed the movement with short, useful lines. "Don't lift the head. Breathe from the shoulders. Bring that chair. We'll make shade." From his jacket, he pulled a thin handkerchief and placed it in the cyclist's hand. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release. One of the tourists wafted forward for a better angle. Without turning, Eitan spoke to the air. "You can film, but don't come closer." A small permission, paired with a firm boundary, dissolved resistance. "Has anyone called an ambulance?" he asked the room of air. "I did," came a voice. "Good, then let's open the airway," he said. Half a step more. People complied without quite knowing why. Eitan's shoulder line stayed steady. His gaze neither rose nor sank. His tone never brushed panic. Rhythm did the work. The cyclist's breathing began to settle. Eitan counted again. 1, 2, 3, setting the cadence. The door remained a live boundary. Those inside leaned toward it. He widened the circle so the threshold wouldn't spill, and the crowd's tension converted into tasks. The faded knot on his wrist caught a strand of sun and glowed for a second. No badge, no lettering, just the wear of being tied and untied. The cashier, Lingering at the back of the crowd, glanced at it and then at Aitan's face. No anger there, and no pride, only the work state. One of the tourists murmured a fractured apology in a softened common tongue. Aitan accepted without dipping his head. Distance, when kept, functions like a well-shaped clause. Enough and no more. A siren drew itself into a line far off and then entered the street's arteries. Aitan stepped back, leaving space. Medics swung down and asked the standard questions. Head impact? Any vomiting? Aitan answered with timing and without extra words. No head strike. Fall to the side. Fast breathing, now regular. No vomiting. Good work, one of them said. Aitan acknowledged with a small nod. For him, the point was not applause, but handing the scene back. When the cyclist was loaded, a hush fell. In that hush, people heard the difference between right and loud. As the ambulance pulled away, the street found its beat. Aitan walked to the door but didn't enter. The open sign flipped in the gust and showed closed. He dropped a crushed plastic bottle into the bin by the frame. Small signs make room for larger sounds. The cashier appeared in the glass, gathered breath to speak, and let it go. The three tourists lowered their phones and drifted back. No one approached. Distance had become a new word they all now shared. "Are you medical?" a woman asked, shy and practical. "No," Aitan said. "Just passing." He spoke without withholding and without display. No one asked his name. He didn't offer it. Sometimes a name sits truer unsaid. The knot on his wrist carried intent instead of label. He walked to the corner market. Half a loaf, skim milk, AAA batteries, a fresh handkerchief. On his way out, the pharmacy window showed a flyer. First aid workshop, Saturdays. He put a small mark on his pocket note. Pre-register? Life doesn't ask for loud heroics so much as quiet readiness. Later that afternoon, he passed the same café. Closed, had flipped back to open. The interior looked intentional now. Cups in parallel, table legs on a straight line. The cashier came to the doorframe. "About what I said," he breathed. "I'm sorry." "If no service is necessary, say it," Aitan replied. "But choose your tone." The cashier nodded. "Understood." Apology, he thought, is not debt collection. It's a tuning. At home, dusk brought the city's old noises through the window. A chair leg, a hinge, a siren far enough away to become memory. Aitan opened a small notebook and wrote 3 words on today's line: distance, permission, surrender. His phone buzzed again with the same reminder. The screen pulsed 3 ideas and went dark. Speech, tone, distance. If needed, silence. The knot had loosened. He retied it, fingers tracing the same path as always. It wasn't a medal, it was a reminder. The next day, Aitan took the same street. At the cafe door, he heard the new first sentence arrive with its right tone. "Welcome, what can I get you?" He joined the line. When it was his turn, he said, "Filter." "Black, here or to go?" "On the way." The cashier passed the cup and met his eyes only long enough to add, "And thanks for yesterday." "You're welcome," Aitan said, and kept walking, at the same rhythm that it held 1 day ago, 1 hour ago, 5 minutes before the crowd formed. The city moved. People lived the next stories in real time. In one of those stories, a quiet man left at a door chose 5 minutes later not to do the obvious, and order took shape. He crossed the corner where the cyclist had fallen and paused a breath longer than habit. The curb still held a chalky scuff. The door that had flared open yesterday now hung politely shut. A traffic light clicked, and with it a chorus of small, ignored mechanics. The hinge settling, a stroller wheel finding its track, a shoe tapping twice before deciding not to hurry. He took it all in without ceremony, like checking weather before a walk. At the pharmacy window, the workshop flyer remained. He read it again, then snapped a quiet picture. Not to post, not to prove, only to remember. The knot on his wrist rasped against his sleeve. He tightened it half a turn, the way you seal a saved draft. Restraint, he thought, is not a pose, it's maintenance. By the time he reached the next block, the coffee had cooled to the exact temperature he preferred. He drank and let the cup warm his palm more than his mouth. A child pointed at a pigeon. A parent chose patience over haste. A cyclist rang the bell and then waited instead of squeezing through. None of it was remarkable, and yet all of it was what he hoped cities could keep: tone first, movement after. He turned the corner and disappeared into ordinary time, leaving behind a door that now knew how to greet, a street that had practiced breathing, and a bracelet whose knot would be retied that night and the next, a small task in a long discipline. Remember, sometimes the greatest protectors are the quietest ones, and sometimes the man working in your garden isn't just protecting the flowers, but your life too.